Will that finally keep Linda safe? Or will it provoke an even darker threat? Hi everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're following Linda and CEO Quang as they share fruit, work side by side in the mountain garden, then head down to the village to meet Quang's mother, where Linda helps pick lemons and sell them at the market. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episode. Morning mist wrapped Linda's little mountain house like a cold blanket. She woke before sunrise, pulled on her worn jacket, and stepped outside. The wind slipped through the bamboo and shook the thin walls behind her. Below the slope, the village was still asleep, only faint smoke lines rising from a few early kitchens. Linda went straight to the garden. She watered the vegetable beds slowly, careful not to waste a drop. She pulled weeds with numb fingers, then moved to the lemon tree and checked the branches, whispering to herself about what she'd sell at the next market. But her eyes kept drifting to one place, the spot where her DUI cage used to be. Empty, quiet, too clean. Linda swallowed the tight feeling in her throat and forced herself to work faster, like speed could outrun sadness. She tried not to think about the night it happened, the creak, the silence after, the shame of feeling stupid for crying over an animal. Then she noticed the fence. One wire looked slightly pulled, not broken, just disturbed. In the damp soil near the edge of the yard, a faint mark pressed into the mud, half a footprint, half a smear. Linda stared at it until her breathing turned shallow. Maybe it's nothing, she muttered. Maybe it's just a distant engine cut through the fog. She froze, watering can hanging in her hand. The sound climbed the mountain road in short, struggling bursts, like the bike was fighting every turn. The engine grew louder, closer, until a headlight finally appeared through the mist and stopped at her gate. Linda's heart jumped. CEO Quang swung off the motorbike, helmet in hand. Dust clung to his jacket. His eyes swept over the yard, the garden, and then, almost immediately, the empty place where the cage used to sit. His gaze softened. "I'm back," he said quietly. "Sorry I disappeared. Work trapped me." Linda tried to speak, but her voice caught. You came up here?" Quang didn't answer right away. He turned to the back of the bike and untied a rope securing a large object covered by sackcloth. With one pull, he revealed a sturdy transport cage. Inside, two DUIs shifted nervously, their small bodies pressing against the wire. Linda's hands flew to her mouth. Quang lifted the cage carefully, like it weighed more than it should. "I bought them on the way up. Healthy, strong." He looked at her, serious now. "I know you've been hurting about the one you lost." Linda blinked hard and turned her face away, pretending the cold was making her eyes sting. It's fine. It's not just anything." Quang cut in, voice gentle but firm. "You raised it. It mattered." For a moment, Linda didn't trust herself to speak. She simply opened the gate wider and stepped back. "Come inside," she managed. "You'll freeze out here." The house was small, but warmer than the yard once Linda lit the stove. Fire snapped to life, orange light dancing across the wooden walls. Quang set the cage down near the door and rubbed his hands together. Linda brought out a basket of fruit, wild plums and small mountain persimmons. She set it on the low table between them. They ate in quiet at first. The plums were sour. Quang winced, and Linda almost laughed despite herself. "You're not used to mountain fruit," she teased softly. Quang chewed and nodded. "I'm used to meetings that taste worse." That finally pulled a real smile out of her. As the fire warmed the room, Quang studied her face. "Did anything else happen while I was gone?" Linda hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the window, toward the fence outside. "Just the feeling of being watched. And I saw marks near the yard." Maybe nothing. Quang's jaw tightened, but he didn't panic. He simply stood up. All right. We'll make sure it becomes nothing. Linda glanced at the cage. You already brought Duai. That's enough. Quang shook his head. This cage is for carrying them, not for keeping them safe. He stepped outside and pointed to a sheltered corner near the wall, where wind and rain couldn't hit directly. We built a proper cage here, raised off the ground, reinforced, locked. Linda stared. You're going to build it? Now? Quang's answer was simple. Yes. He pulled tools from his bag, hammer, nails, wire, and a padlock. Linda's eyebrows lifted. You planned this. I don't like losing, he said, and there was something in his voice that made Linda believe him. He carried bamboo poles and scrap wood from the side of the yard, measuring and arranging them with steady hands. Linda followed him, holding pieces in place, tying rope knots where he needed extra support. Quang built a raised base first, strong enough that nobody could just grab the cage and run. Then he reinforced the corners with extra wire mesh and added a thicker latch. He tested it twice, pulling hard. The frame didn't budge. Try, he said. Linda pulled the door. It held firm. Relief loosened something in her chest. They moved the Duai into the new cage together. The animal sniffed fresh straw and settled into the corner, cautious but calm. Quang clicked the lock closed and handed the key to Linda. You keep this. Every night you check it. And if you hear anything, you call me. Linda looked up. Even if it's late? Especially if it's late, Quang said. The fog thinned slightly as the morning climbed. With the cage secured, the yard felt different. Still cold, still lonely, but not helpless. Quang didn't stop there. He rolled up his sleeves and followed Linda into the garden. He repaired the trellis, pulled weeds, and dug a shallow trench to guide runoff away from the beds. Linda showed him where the soil was rocky and where the vegetables needed more shade. At one point, Quang struggled with a stubborn root. Linda laughed, the sound bright in the quiet mountain air. CEO Quang, she teased, you're losing to a weed. He wiped dirt from his cheek and narrowed his eyes at the root like it had offended him personally. This weed is tougher than some people I negotiate with. Linda laughed again, warmer this time. When the garden finally looked neat and the sun began to glow faintly behind the clouds, Quang wiped his hands and looked down the path leading to the village. Linda, he said, voice careful. Come with me this afternoon. Linda's smile faded. Where? My home, Quang replied. Down in the village. I want you to meet my mother. Linda's stomach tightened immediately. Why would she want to meet me? Quang stepped closer, not forcing her, but steady. Because you shouldn't be alone up here. And if you're going to keep living on this mountain, you need someone in the village who will treat you like family, not gossip. Linda looked down at her hands. Rough, dirt under her nails, not the hands of someone who belonged in a CEO's world. What if she doesn't like me? Linda whispered. Quang didn't hesitate. Then she'll still respect you, because I do. Behind them, the DUI rustled in the new cage, safe and locked. Linda took a slow breath, staring at the path that would lead her down from the mountain, and possibly into a life she'd never dared to imagine. The sun was already leaning west when Quang and Linda started down the mountain path. Behind them, the new DUI cage sat firm against the wall, raised off the wet ground and locked tight. Linda still looked back twice before she forced herself to keep walking. Quang noticed. I checked it, he said, and I'll check it again when we're back. The road down was narrow and uneven. Mist hugged the slopes, but the closer they got to the village, the more the air changed. Warmer, noisier, alive. Chickens scratched near fences. Smoke curled from kitchen roofs. Somewhere, a baby cried, then fell quiet. Quang's house wasn't big. It wasn't rich, either. Just a sturdy home in a poor northern mountain village, packed earth yard, a few herb pots by the steps, and a small garden behind the house where lemon trees grew patiently. Before Linda could breathe properly, the door opened. Quang's mother stepped out. She looked at Linda the way a mountain woman looks at a storm. Calm, measuring, not afraid. Linda bowed slightly. "Hello, Auntie. I'm Linda." Quang's mother's gaze moved from Linda's face to her hands with dirt under the nails, knuckles rough from cold mornings. Then she turned to Quang. "You brought her all the way down," she said. Quang answered simply, "Yes, I want you to meet her." A quiet beat passed. Linda's stomach tightened, waiting for rejection. Then Quang's mother stepped aside. "Come in, it's cold outside." Inside, the house smelled like tea and wood smoke. Nothing fancy, clean, real. Quang's mother poured 2 cups without asking, set down a plate of roasted peanuts, and sat opposite Linda. "You live alone on the mountain," she said, not a question. "Yes, Auntie." "And you raised Dewey?" Linda hesitated, then nodded. "I did. One was stolen recently." Quang's mother's eyes sharpened. "Stolen?" Linda lowered her gaze. "I should have locked it better." Quang's mother set her cup down with a small, controlled sound. "Don't rush to blame yourself. Some people see a girl alone and think they can take whatever they want." Linda's throat tightened. She didn't expect anyone to say it out loud, especially not her. Quang's mother stood. "Come, we'll go to the garden. Talking is easier when the hands are busy." Behind the house, the lemon tree was full. Fruit glowed pale yellow against dark leaves. Quang's mother handed Linda a woven basket. "Pick the older ones. Twist the stem. Don't pull. If you tear the branch, it won't give you fruit next season." Linda nodded quickly, grateful for clear instructions. They picked lemons side by side. At first, Linda stayed silent, trying not to look nervous. But Quang's mother kept the rhythm steady, showing Linda which fruit would sell well, which ones had marks buyers might complain about, how to wipe the skin clean with her sleeve so it looked brighter. After a while, Quang's mother asked, "On the mountain, do you have anyone close?" Linda shook her head. "Not really." Quang's mother didn't stop picking, but her voice softened just slightly. "Quiet places can be dangerous. You have to be careful." Linda nodded. "Yes, Auntie." When the baskets were full, Quang lifted them like they were nothing. "You two go to the market," he said. "I need to handle something." Linda looked up immediately. "What are you going to do?" Quang avoided making it dramatic. "Just something quick." Quang's mother waved her hand as if cutting off Linda's worry. "Let him go. Come, market won't wait." The village market was small and muddy, a line of tarps and low tables, voices and bargaining mixing with the smell of grilled corn and damp soil. Heads turned when they saw Quang's mother with Linda. Curiosity flickered in people's eyes. Linda felt the stares and almost shrank. Quang's mother didn't let her. She laid the lemons out neatly, then began calling buyers over with calm confidence. When someone tried to push the price down too far, Quang's mother didn't argue loudly. She simply held her ground until the buyer sighed and paid fairly. Then she nodded at Linda. "You, try." Linda's mouth went dry. Still, she lifted the scale and spoke clearly, copying the tone she'd heard. Firm, polite, unashamed. A woman bought 2 kilos, then a man bought more for lemon salt. Another buyer asked if they were fresh picked today. Linda answered, "Yes." And for the first time, her voice didn't shake. Little by little, Linda stopped feeling like an outsider. When the baskets were nearly empty, Quang's mother finally glanced at her and gave a small nod. Approval without sweetness, but real. "You're not lazy. said, "Don't refuse." Linda tried. "Auntie, I can't." "You can," Quang's mother cut in. "You worked." Linda held the bills like they were heavier than they looked. When they returned to the house, Quang was already in the yard. And beside him was a sturdy transport cage, new dewy inside, plus a thicker lock and extra wire mesh. Linda stopped mid-step. "Quang." He smiled like it was the simplest thing in the world. "I told you. I don't like seeing you sad." Linda's voice cracked. "You bought more?" "I bought them to replace what you lost," Quang said. "And I bought stronger locks. No shortcuts this time." Quang's mother walked up, stared at the cage, then looked at Linda. "Tonight, he carries them back up with you, and you reinforce that fence." Linda nodded quickly, overwhelmed. Quang's mother's gaze sharpened again. Protective, not cold. "If anyone comes near your house again," she said, "you don't stay quiet. You come down, or you call. Understand?" Linda swallowed hard. "Yes, Auntie." Quang stepped closer and gently closed Linda's fingers around the cage key he'd brought. "This stays with you," he said. "You lock it, you check it, and you're not alone anymore." Linda looked from Quang to his mother, then back toward the mountain path rising into mist. For the first time, the mountain didn't feel like a place that could swallow her. It felt like a home she could defend, because now someone would stand with her. And as the sky darkened, the episode ended with a quiet promise, and the uneasy thought that the thief who dared take once might try again.
Chào mọi người. Trong tập này, Linda và bà Linda theo bà và cậu cháu ra nương mía. Dưới nắng sớm, bà vừa chặt mía vừa kể chuyện ngày xưa. Dạy chặt 3 hoặc 4 khúc cho đẹp để bán được giá. Đồng mía cao dần, 45 đồng trở thành hy vọng cho phiên chợ. Một cây mía đổ bất ngờ khiến cả nhóm kêu, rồi cười xòa vì kịp đỡ nhau. Chiều xuống, Linda buồn bã vì con rúi của mình đã biến mất. Nghi có kẻ trộm rình quanh nhà. CEO Quang ghé đến lắng nghe và trấn an và tự sửa chiếc camera cũ trong kho, kéo dây lắp trước sân nhà để bảo vệ cô. Đêm đến, Linda nấu cơm nếp cẩm mời anh ở lại ăn. Hai người trò chuyện lòng ấm lại. Quang kể áp lực công ty, camera nháy sáng, bóng lạ thoáng qua, và không biết Linda có sống sót qua được đêm nay không. Mọi người nếu thấy video hay, hãy cho mình một like, một subscribe. Cảm ơn mọi người nhé.